Hey, everybody, welcome to the Denial Breakthrough Workshop. This is a sort of a special event, and the replay will only be up for 24 hours. For those of you who are here with us live, it's good to see you guys. I'm going to do the presentation first and take questions last, so be sure to come with your questions. And unlike my normal content, we're going to go all like official style and have a whole PowerPoint presentation. But I want to tell you why I decided to do this. I was getting ready to do our challenge again this week, our denial breakthrough challenge, which we've done twice before. I think we did it in October and November. And as I was sort of getting my head around it and rearranging some slides and getting some things ready, it kind of occurred to me that it was missing a big piece, and that big piece being like the foundational understanding of denial. Because in the challenge, I give you like a lot of like strategies on how to get through to your loved one and what to say and what not to say. But I felt like it was missing this helping you understand the underlying pieces. And so that's why I decided to do this strategy. It's kind of like a prequel to the challenge. So this is all about the psychological underpinnings of denial and how to actually break through it. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go through all that, and I'm going to see if I can manage all this technology. I have like 3 screens up. It feels like a little overwhelming, so y'all hang with me, okay? All right, we got our slides up here. Now let me get my presenter view up here so I can see what I'm doing. All right, I think we got it. I think we're up here. All right, so we're gonna be talking about what I decided to call the 3D method to break through denial and recover your loved one. Raise your hand in the little chat feature if you can relate to this image right here. If you've ever stood in front of your partner trying to make them see what seems obvious to you, and keep your hand up if you've ever felt like, oops, oh, sorry. I'm missing my little scrolly thing here. If you've ever felt like you're talking to a brick wall, this is where most people live. And today I'm going to show you why this image is more accurate than you realize and what's actually happening that you can't see. When you look at someone in denial from the outside, what you see is just a bunch of basically outside behaviors. You see broken promises, you see that they're late, they're always hiding, they're unpredictable, they're probably lying, they're irritable, emotionally distant, defensive. And so it feels like that's what you're dealing with. Those are just the outside behaviors, though. And that's a 2D point of view. But if you could expand your point of view and look at this from a 3D model, you would see a entirely different situation. It would look more like this. This is what I want you to imagine when you think about dealing with denial. You have this outside gate, and those are the things that you see, the behaviors, the defensiveness, the lying, the sneaking, the what seems like not caring about family or putting the substance before family. That's what it seems like from the outside. That's that gate that's around here. Inside, underneath that, you have this entire wall of denial, which is made up of all these little tiny thought processes, and we'll get into what those are. But the important thing here is to understand that this entire denial wall is built on 3 pillars. And those 3 pillars are fear, shame, and identity. We're going to talk more about each one of those. Now, on the outside of that gate, you got these guards. We're going to call them anger and defensiveness. It's a huge wall of denial. How many of you have said these statements before? You have a drinking problem. You're an alcoholic. If you don't stop, I'm leaving. How much did you drink last night? The kids are scared of you. You promised you wouldn't do that anymore. Normal people don't act like that. If you loved us enough, you would stop. If you've ever said any of those statements, you're in good company. You're not alone. We're judgment free here. Every one of these statements, no matter how true, no matter how justified they are, make the problem worse, not because you said them wrong, but because you're aiming at the wrong target. Here's the pattern. You say something like, "You have a drinking problem." What do they say? "I don't have a problem." An argument ensues or nothing happens, they just stonewall you, and you end up feeling frustrated. Maybe you say something like, "If you don't stop, I'm leaving." And they may say, "Well, go ahead then." Maybe they won't say it, but they might be thinking it. You basically end up in a power struggle, a standoff, and nothing changes. You might say something like, "Look at how much you drank last night," or "You promised you were only gonna drink 2." And you might get a response something like, "You're overreacting." They're just gonna minimize, they're gonna make you doubt yourself, they might gaslight you, and essentially nothing happens because it's like you're trying to beat your head against that giant stone wall of denial. And not only is it not getting you anywhere, it truly is making the situation worse. Here's what's really happening. You could take that big stone wall and look inside of it. We're going to call it the denial wall. You would see those 3 pillars are actually underneath: the fear, the shame, and the identity. We're going to think about those like gauges. And when you press on those gauges, they inflate. They make this denial wall even bigger. You gotta remember denial is a symptom. It's a massive defense mechanism that's designed to protect. If you want to get through that denial, you need to know what it's trying to protect. And that's those 3 gauges. The fear, as in the person is scared about what they will lose. The shame, as in they're worried about, what does this say about me if I have this problem? Their identity. What will life be like without it? What will people think of me? And we don't mean to, but we accidentally hit on these sore spots. And that's why we get all of those defensive responses from our loved ones, which make us feel even more exasperated, frustrated, and hopeless. So in your head, I want you imagining this giant wall. Look at it. Look at those statements. I don't know if you can see them. I don't Depends on what device you're looking at it on, a bigger device or a smaller device. You can see statements in that wall like, "Everyone drinks. I can stop whenever I want. You're overreacting. It's been a stressful week." Each one of those thoughts helps protect your loved one against the rising pressure of the fear, the shame, the identity concerns. So it allows the person not to have to face what feels terrifying to them, reality underneath. Every single one of you has tried to knock down this wall by attacking those bricks. Let me show you what happens when you do that. Before you can even get to that pyramid or that wall, that denial wall, you have to disarm these 2 guards, anger and resentment. And as long as you're in the bad guy role, you're never even going to get close to that pyramid. Now, I talk a lot about how to get out of the bad guy role in a lot of my other content, so I'm not even really going to cover that in this presentation, other than to say, before you get to that denial wall, which we're about to talk about how to conquer it, how to take that thing down, you got to get through these 2 guys right here. And if they see you as an enemy, you're not even getting in the gate to get close. So I know you guys have heard me talk about that a lot. We can come back to that another day, but that's all about getting out of the bad guy role. Is how you get through these 2 guards. Now, when you're trying to address those bricks, those denial statements, you might say something like, "You promised you wouldn't drink on the weekdays," or "You promised you would only drink on the weekends." This is the part where you attack the wall, you confront it, you threaten it, you plead, you present your evidence, but you're not going to break through. You're giving them even more material to build on. You see that guy up there at the top of that thing? He's laying more bricks. That's exactly what happens when you try to come at it in this direct way. Because every confrontation triggers the things your loved one is trying to avoid. It increases the pressure in one of those 3 denial pillars. And when the pressure goes up, the wall must go up to contain it. It's not stubbornness, it's physics. The harder you push, the stronger the wall gets. because you're dealing with a defense mechanism. So if they feel attacked, even if you're not meaning to attack, but if they feel attacked, they're going to put up their defenses, right? And the wall goes back up. So let's look at each one of these little gauges because this is the foundation that the whole thing is built on. We're going to look at them each individually. The fear gauge measures things like, what will I lose if I admit this? And for someone in addiction who has an addiction problem, the answer feels like everything. They feel like nothing's going to be fun anymore. They feel like they're going to lose all their friends. They're afraid of losing their job, maybe, their sense of control, their health, their identity as a functional, highly successful person. They might be afraid of the physical hell of withdrawal. They might be afraid of judgment. They might be afraid of what getting help or going to treatment means. They could be afraid of who they'll be without alcohol. This gauge is maxed out when your person is in denial. Hopefully, this is helping you see why trying to scare someone isn't the best way to get through denial, because the more scary you make it, the more they're going to raise their defenses. They're just going to keep adding little bricks to that denial wall. You use threats, ultimatums, consequences, warnings. Every single one of those things turns up that fear gauge. You're trying to scare them into change. Like when you say something like, did you look at those lab reports you got back from your doctor? Can you see that your stuff is elevated? It seems like a natural approach, but you got to realize that's a scare tactic, right? Like you're trying to scare, what I call scared straight, right? Like if I don't do something bad's going to happen to me. And my guess is it might make them think about it for a second, but then guess what? They're going to run back in behind that denial wall, and they're probably just going to drink to deal with that uncomfortable feeling. More fear doesn't break denial. It builds denial. The more scared they are, the more they need to hide behind the wall. This is why hitting rock bottom doesn't work for everyone. You're waiting for fear to be so high that it finally breaks through, but most people in that high fear state just means they're going to have higher defenses. They're going to put up more barrier between you and them. Now, the shame gauge. The shame gauge measures, what does admitting this say about who I am? And that answer can feel devastating. It says, I'm weak, I'm a failure, I'm broken, I'm a bad parent, I'm not the person I thought I was. Shame is that feeling of, I am bad. Not I did something bad, but I am bad. And most people with substance abuse problems are already drowning in shame. The gauge is maxed out before you even open your mouth. And what do we tend to do? We tend to pile it on even more. So if we can't scare them out of it, if we shame them out of it, think about when you're little and your mama was like, shame, shame, and your mama maybe shamed you in or out of certain behaviors. That's what's going on here. And we think if we pile that on, it's going to break through that denial. But again, it just increases the pressure in that pillar or that gauge, however you want to think about it, which makes the whole situation that much more. These statements, even though they're true, they are shame-inducing when they say you're defective. The person perceives you're saying that they're defective, that they're failing, that they're causing damage. And when the shame spikes, what happens? The wall goes up because the alternative, facing that level of shame, feels unbearable. Denial becomes survival mechanism, a necessity. You can't shame someone into health. You can only shame them into hiding. So if your loved one is doing a lot of hiding and sneaking, it's a good sign that their shame gauge, that shame pillar, is really, really strong. Now, the identity pillar or gauge, the identity gauge measures who will I become if I admit this? And if the perceived answer is terrifying, as in like, I'll become an alcoholic, a label that feels permanent and defining, or addict, I'll be like my father who I swore I'd never become. I'll be broken forever. I'll lose my personality, my fun, my edge, my charm. For many people, alcohol or whatever substance has become woven into their identity. I'm the guy who knows everything about wine, or I'm the guy who knows everything about, IP what are they called? What are they called, Brie? The beers people drink? The fancy ones? I can't even think 'cause I don't know anything about it. Because 'cause I'm not that guy. I'm the fun parent who lets loose. I'm the one that can handle my liquor. Admitting that you have a problem means you're losing that identity entirely. When this gauge is maxed out and they're feeling like they're gonna lose part of themselves if they acknowledge to you they have an addiction, then you can see why they still continue to hide behind that wall. The comparisons attack their core sense of self. You're telling them, "You've become someone else, someone defective, someone abnormal, someone like the people you feared becoming or people you said you would never be like." When your identity's threatened, the wall goes up because admitting you have a problem means accepting a new, terrible identity. Denial protects them from becoming that person. They don't want to be the person who can't drink it all, who can't smoke with their buddies, who can't do the things that they're used to doing because they see themselves that way, and they also worry about the way other people see them, right? And if they change, it's like, what will that be like? What will people think? Will I lose friends? So now that you can see that every confrontation, every threat, every plea, piece of evidence hits one or more of those gauges. And when the gauges spike, it pushes the denial wall higher. Like, for example, if you say you're hurting me, that's hitting the shame button, but also the fear button. If you say something like, if you don't stop, I'm going to leave, you're hitting that fear button. That ultimatum hits that like fear button. Or if you say you're an alcoholic, you're hitting their shame and identity button. So these statements are just increasing the very thing that's causing the denial. Let's test your understanding here. If I say this statement, you promised you would only drink on the weekend. Which one of these buttons are you pressing? I'll give you guys a second. Y'all put it in the chat. All right. Y'all ready? Everybody got it in the chat? I'm gonna give you some. I'm gonna tell you the answer. It hits the shame button primarily, as in like you broke your promise, you failed. But it can also hit the fear button because in the back of their mind and your mind, they know that if they keep breaking their promises, this something's going to happen. Eventually, you're going to leave, or they're going to get a huge consequence, or kicked out, or whatever it is that's sort of riding on the whole situation. So instead of trying to break through the wall, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have strategy here. I want you to focus on these pillars, not these defensive statements that they're giving you. Now, I call this whole process the 3D method, as in we're going to look at this from a 3D perspective to see what's really going on underneath all that denial, but also to help you remember the D's, as in disarm the guards, dismantle the wall, and then direct towards change. A lot of times what we're trying to do is direct people towards change. You need help, you got to do this or that, or you should go to meetings or whatever. We haven't done the other two first. We haven't disarmed the guards. We haven't dismantled the wall. So let's talk about what it takes to dismantle this giant denial wall. All right. This is definitely going to be counterintuitive to you. Everything inside of you wants to make them face it, own it, feel the consequences. But you can't scare someone out of hiding. You have to make it safe enough for them to come out. When the pressure drops, the wall doesn't need to be so high. Now becomes unnecessary. And when that happens, that's when change can occur. So you got to get through those guards. You got to get that wall down before you can have the influence that we talk so much about on this channel. So let's get practical. How do you lower each one of those gauges? We're going to start with fear. Instead of saying something like, if you don't stop, I'm leaving, you could say something like, I'm committed to working through this together. Now, that doesn't mean that you're saying you're never going to leave, But what you're saying is, I'm on your team and we're going to figure this out together. The principle here is to make the future seem less scary, not more scary. And you can show them a path forward that doesn't involve losing everything. Most of those fears that they're scared of are not actual reality. They're sort of what I would call them. There's a word for it, not real fears. It'll come to me in a second, but basically irrational beliefs. They're irrational beliefs, but for them it feels very weird, very real. But change doesn't have to mean catastrophe. And if you can help them see that life will be better without it, instead of trying to make them see that life is going to get worse if you don't let it go, it's just sort of an opposite strategy, right? Instead of trying to force what you're going to lose and what all these bad things are going to happen to you, you're going to go at it from a positive perspective, saying what you're going to gain, how life is going to get better. When I work with my clients in recovery coaching in our strengths-based recovery coaching program, that's what I talk about. I talk about, oh my God, your life's going to get so much better. Things are going to be so much simpler. I'm constantly painting this picture for them about what it's going to be like without it, to try to help them reimagine what that future is going to be like. Because in their mind, it's sort of bleak when they think about what that change. The shame gauge, when you want to lower the shame, basically what you're doing here is you want to separate the person from the problem. You want to make it clear that having this problem doesn't mean that you are the problem. And so often we try to do this the opposite. We try to force it on them. You're destroying your family. Look what you've become. You're an alcoholic. You're an addict. But all of those things increase that shame, right? So instead of that, you want to do what, like, the counseling word for it would be called, like, normalize it. You want to make it feel less horrible, not more horrible. Think about it. How hard have you tried to make them see how awful this thing is, right? I bet you have beat your head against this. You have got a jackhammer out on it. You've done every single thing possible to try to get through, and it hasn't worked, right? And you're trying to raise the stakes to make that happen, but it's not working. You wanna make it less scary, not more scary. And I know it seems crazy, but when I work with people, I'm like, I just normalize it by saying things, um, "Dude, no wonder you ended up with an alcohol problem. Like, your, like, job is to take clients out every week and, like, booze and schmooze them, right? It's, like, part of your job. No wonder this happened to you." So it's like you're giving them a way to see the problem, but keeping their ego intact. So that's what I mean when I say separate the problem from the person. Don't make it about their character. Make it about, hey, this happened. This can happen. It doesn't mean you're a horrible person. We're going to get you out of this. And when I talk to people, I'm always super confident about it, because I don't ever want to use language like, you're never going to beat this, or hardly anyone, only 10% of people beat this. These are things that people say all the time in treatment. You hear counselors say this stuff, you hear families say this stuff, but again, it just hits those fear and shame buttons, which I don't think makes it any easier for someone to come out of. Now, I want you to know this doesn't mean you're letting them off the hook. It means you're making it possible for them to look at the problem without feeling worthless, like a terrible human being. Shame doesn't motivate people to change. It motivates people to hide. Reduce the shame, and they finally can look at the situation honestly. Like, it's not that scary. It's like turning the light on the scary monster. As I see you, Mr. Monster Man, it's not that scary. You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of that the cartoon monsters with Sully and the other one's name. The little green one is Sully, and the big one, I can't think of the name. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The monsters where they're trying to scare the kids and get them to scream so they can fill up their electricity or whatever. It's like that. And then eventually at the end, they figure out, like, oh, if we make them laugh, that works better. That's what I'm telling you here. Trying to scare them. Yes, there are sometimes you can scare someone out of it, but it's in very limited situations, usually in situations where someone is like end stage addiction and they're faced with going to prison or going to treatment, something like that. And that's scary enough that sometimes you can snap them out of it. But if your person is still somewhat functioning, they're still holding a job or going to school or taking care of the family or the kids or whatever, you're going to have a really hard time using that kind of tactic to get them to change. Now, if you want to lower the identity gauge, this is all about preserving their core sense of self. You can show them that addressing the problem doesn't mean that you have to become someone else. You don't have to accept some kind of permanent label. You're not saying there is a problem. You're not saying there's not a problem. You're saying the problem doesn't erase who you are. So a lot of times we want to get through someone's denial by trying to get them to see they're being a bad person somehow, that they're letting you down, that they're letting their kids down, that they're failing their clients at work, that they're disappointing their parents, whatever it is. You're trying to hit that identity button, but it doesn't work. When you lower this identity issue, you lower that gauge, it makes it possible for them to look at the problem without feeling like they are a terrible person or without feeling like the idea of being sober is so terrible. When the pressure drops and these columns start to come down, the wall becomes unnecessary and denial starts to crumble on its own. It's a lot more effective to target these foundational things that are the reason the denial is there in the first place. If you can hit them strategically, you can crumble the whole thing because it makes facing the problem feel less intimidating. The person can sort of like peek over the wall, right? They can kind of like, it makes me think of, when you cover your eyes, but you're like peeking. It's like that. They can consider the possibility that they can start seeing what everyone else is seeing, start seeing what you're seeing. Not because you forced them, not because you scared them, but because it finally is safe enough to peek out. The transformation. When all three gauges are maxed out, you get denial. The denial is at a maximum. Every conversation turns into a battle. Change isn't possible. And when you're dealing with your loved one like that, you're fighting the wrong battle. Before you understand this sort of 3D system, the looking at denial for what it really is, past what you're seeing right there on the surface, right? Before that, every conversation goes badly. They either blow up at you, gaslight you, avoid you, stonewall you. Depends on their personality, but basically, it's anything to deflect these negative feelings that the conversation brings on them. Raise your hand in the chat if you feel like any mention of anything related to the addiction. Maybe you're not even bringing up the addiction. Maybe you're bringing up a person that is connected to the addiction or anything around it. Maybe if money's a big part of it and you bring up money, any little hint can trigger an argument, a fight, a shutdown, right? If you're in that kind of situation, it means that you're hitting one of these three gauges and it's making it go in the opposite. When you're in that state, it feels like trying to get them to change is impossible because you've tried all these things, you've beat your head against the wall, and nothing has worked. But once you understand what to target and how to target it, the change becomes a much more natural step, and the hiding isn't nearly as necessary. Now, it's possible a lot of you are thinking, but I've tried to be supportive. I've tried being understanding and it didn't work. I hear that sometimes when I'm on my YouTube lives, like I tried that technique, it didn't work. But there's like a critical difference between being nice and understanding the system that you're hoping for. You can be nice, you can do the positive reinforcement, but once you really understand what you're looking at, which is why I wanted to do this for you guys today. So I wanted you to have a visual to think of what it is that I'm actually targeting. I'm trying to reduce the fear. I'm trying to reduce the anxiety around the identity issue here and the shame. So once you can strategically do that, you're going to move from just trying to hope it gets better and just trying to throw a little technique here and there, like peppering in with no plan at all. You got to be strategic. You're not just being supportive. You're going to systematically lower the gauges. and you're going to use specific language to do it. Not wishful thinking, it's engineering, and engineering the science. It's going to work, right? Because you know exactly what you're doing. You got to look at this. It's hard when you're in it, but when you can back up from it from that 3D point of view and you can get a million miles back and you can see what's really going on, you can see where those 3 little columns are, and that's where the vulnerability is, right? And instead of trying to make it worse, which makes it build, we're going to reduce the pressure there. Now, you might also be wondering, isn't this manipulative? The answer to that is no, it's not manipulative. Manipulation is getting somebody to do something against their will. This is like removing a barrier to what they already want. You're trying to help them get what they already want. Now, the reality of this is if you follow your instincts, you're going to keep using the threats, the ultimatums, the confrontations, the silent treatments. You're probably going to get more of the same. You can spend the next 5 years beating your head against this ginormous brick rock wall, or you can spend the next 5 months trying to strategically lower the pressure. Both are going to require effort. Both require consistency, but only one of them creates the conditions. Follow your instincts is the path that you've been on. This 3D denial defense system, this is an alternative. It's a faster way to working with the psychology instead of against it. I've been doing this a long time, and this is what I do. Instead of, when people come in my office, instead of trying to make it seem more horrible, I try to make it seem less scary. I try to make it seem like, yeah, we're going to beat it. It's not even going to be that hard. Instead of telling them things like, you're going to have to change everything about your life and you're going to have to do this forever. That's scary, right? That's just going to make someone want to hide that much more. Now, let's talk about what we've learned. I want to really impress this. Confrontation makes denial stronger. Every time you increase that pressure, you're going to get those more bricks are going to be built, right? You're going to get more denial statements. You have power, but you got to use it strategically. You got to understand the what and the why. Now, we've talked about how this thing works, but you might be wanting more on the how do I do that? Like, what are the things that I say exactly? How do I lower those gauges? If you understand just these principles, this will get you pretty far because you know what you're doing that works and what you're doing that isn't going to work. If you want to learn more tactics specifically about what to say and not to say to work on lowering these gauges, then you look at the Denial Breakthrough Challenge. We're having our next one this week. It's going to start on Thursday. It's going to run Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And we're going to be talking about even more detail about how to do this. That's why I said this one is sort of a prequel to that one, to help you understand why and how the whole thing works. I figured it might be helpful to hear that rather than just telling you what to do. If you're like me, if you tell me why I need to do something a certain way, I'll do it better. Like, pretty compliant. So if you tell me what to do, I'll usually do it. But if I understand the why, like I do it to a whole nother level because I understand what I'm aiming at, not just saying something to say it or doing something to do it. I understand like the science under the whole thing. Now let's see. I'm going to take some questions in just a second. The challenge, like I said, it's 5 days. It's live coaching, and we're going to talk about dismantling denial. We're going to get, I created this image. Y'all like these images I created? I created them on Chat GPT. I always want to say it back. It did pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good, right? This is what I created. This is the blueprint, right? You want to disarm the guards. You want to dismantle the denial wall, like bring it down, crush those columns. And then, and only then, can you direct someone on how to get out of there. Here are some reviews from other people who have taken the challenge. If you've taken it before and you want to take it again, we invite you to do that. I am going to change some things up this time to kind of fit more into this analogy and model. The techniques are still the same, but we're gonna talk about it in a different way. Now, the thing I want you to walk away from this is you cannot scare someone out of hiding. You have to make it safe enough for them to come out. More consequences, more pressure isn't going to work. And I know you know that because you've tried it already. All right. Bree is back there. Thank you, Bree. Bree is like working. It is way past work time. She's an angel. She's back there moderating. And so I am going to take questions, comments, concerns, whatever you got. Bree's back there to help us. Take this off. There we go. Shannon says, what if they are adamant they don't have a problem? That's exactly right, Shannon. That's what we're talking about. They're adamant they don't have a problem. And that is exactly right, especially when they're functional. That's why things like that whole, like the whole tough love thing isn't going to work on someone that's functional. Even like old school interventions and stuff like that, they don't work on someone that's functional because in their mind, they're not that bad. Even if they think they have a little bit of a problem, they don't think the problem is bad enough that they need to quit it all completely or that they need to like go to treatment or get help or something like that. So the crazy thing about it is using things like I said, we talk about this more in the challenge, but like using empathy statements, empathizing with how they see it actually allows them to see what's going wrong easier. It's a way to take the wall down. So, yes, uh, the people we deal with initially, they all think that there's absolutely nothing wrong. And I've spent 20 years of dealing with people sitting in my office who didn't want to be sitting in my office, who didn't think they had a problem and definitely didn't think they needed to talk to some stranger about it. So I wouldn't let that worry you. That I call that the big talk. Don't worry about it because you're strategic. You know what you're doing. You know how to lower those defenses so that they can see it. And at first, it'll be like, well, they can see it a little, and then they can see it a little bit more, and a little bit more. You can like visually imagine those gauges lowering. All right, here's a question. Are we talking about addicts denial or ours? Oh, that's a good question. In this circumstance, we're talking about the addicted person's denial. But I'm guessing it could work the same way, right? It's just this is how denial works. All these examples were that way. But like let's say you have two parents and they're dealing with an addicted child, and maybe that's a young person, or maybe the child is 40, 50 years old, doesn't matter. And one of those parents is in denial about that addiction, right? Which is super common. That's why I'm giving this example because it happens all the time. The other parent is going to try to come at them by, again, this is terrible. These terrible things are going to happen. If you don't stop enabling, they're going to die. And you start slamming on that fear button or slamming on that shame button. Maybe they can't see that their kid's an addict because in their mind, it means they did something wrong, that they were defective as a mother or a father or whatever it is. And it's going to work the same way. So you can take all these principles and apply it wherever you want to. In this circumstance, though, I was specifically talking about someone who has an addiction, but it can be both. Question. What should I do when his bargaining efforts work for months? His willpower is strong, and unfortunately, it creeps back in. Don't you hate this? I hate this. I hate it when it works, right? I'm like, the worst thing can happen is not that they, say that they're only going to drink 2 and that they drink 10. I'm like, that's the good thing. The worst thing that's going to happen is if they say they're only going to drink 2 and they only drink 2 and they do that consistently for like 3 months. Oh my gosh. That happens. I kind of switch tactics. One of the things that I say to clients is, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying, like, is it worth it? Like, just drinking 2, does that do anything for you? How hard is that? How much do you have to think about that? How much do you crave? So instead of trying to say you can't manage it, because some people will manage it for long periods of time. They don't usually do it forever, but they'll do it for long stints. It's miserable. And if you can get people to like let that wall down, they'll actually see that this is a lot of freaking time, energy, effort. I mean, people have all these like ridiculous like formulas and systems and all these things that they have to do to keep it manageable. I'm like, dude, is drinking 2 beers really worth it? Like, do you feel anything or does that just make you crave? So But you can't do that if you're standing outside the guards, right? You gotta at least be inside the gate to be able to have a conversation like that. You gotta be safe enough to be able to do that. Question, is the strategy or the things I say the same for a person who is neurodivergent? Yeah, I think so. And you know your person well enough that you may know that there are, like, certain words or phrases or something that kinda trigger your person a little bit differently, and so you wanna stay away from those. So I would combine what you know about the person specifically with this information, but I don't really think it changes it that much, right? You're trying to make it safer to come out, not scarier. How do you make it feel safe if it's been a huge issue? It's sort of this paradox thing that you do or that I do with my clients. It's like helping them see that, dude, this is going to destroy your life, but also like it's going to be so much better when you get out. And it's not going to be that hard. We're going to do this, and I'll say, listen, we're going to try this. If that don't work, we got plan B. And if that don't work, we got plan C. And if that don't work, we're going to keep going down the list. We're going to get this. And I say it with that kind of tone and that kind of attitude so that it feels maybe instead of making the problem feel smaller, you can make the escape route feel easier. So look at where you can reduce any of those columns or gauges. And if the problem itself, maybe you're dealing with someone who's not functional. Maybe you're dealing with someone who's like end stage, like full blown denial, like hardcore, all the way there. It is going to be harder to minimize the problem, but you can separate the problem from the person. You can help their identity stay intact in other ways, and you can definitely make the way out seem less scary, not more scary. When silence is one of the walls for months on end, what is the best way to dismantle the wall? Well, if the person won't talk to you at all, like, because sometimes I get a question like, how do I help my kid when I haven't seen them? I don't even know where they're living and they won't answer my messages. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know what you can do in that kind of situation because you don't have access to them. But if what you mean by silence is that they just won't talk about this issue, then just talk about other issues. Create safety and connection. Get out of that bag I roll. Like, make yourself just be a safe person to talk to in general. Like, make it pleasant to talk to you. Talk about anything that they're interested in. You don't have to always talk about the topic. In fact, I strongly advise you to only talk about the topic very, very, very limited. So when I have a client who doesn't want to talk about it at all, then I just make it safe to come talk to me. We just have fun, interesting conversations about anything. So you might just have to go back so far to train them that talking to you isn't going to end up making them feel bad. You don't want it to feel like the principal. If they're not talking to you at all, that's a little different. Um, JC says, I'm not the bad guy. My adult son keeps saying he will do a 30-day detox on his own, but there's always a reason he doesn't. Is there a counselor available with next steps? There's a type of counseling that you can look for called motivational interviewing, which helps people that are in the earlier stages of change work through those stages. So it sounds like he's not completely in denial, but my guess is 30-day detox sounds scary. So what I would want to do is take that fear factor down, make it seem less intimidating because he's I'm sure he's thinking about what that's going to be like and committing myself to 30 days. I mean, you're literally committing yourself to like be locked up in a facility most of the time. The facility I used to work at, the door's locked. Like you had to have your key and only the staff had it to come in and out of any of the doors. I mean, it's intimidating. So what you want to do is you want to, if possible, make that process seem less scary. And if you're looking for counseling, I would look for someone who specializes in people who are in the earlier stages of change, which can be tricky when it comes to addiction because it just depends on the addiction person and their philosophies and how they do it. Some have sort of an old school attitude, I call it, of I got my shit together. You need to get your stuff together. That's not the way I would do it. You want someone that's going to, again, make it feel less intimidating. My husband had a brief breakthrough in denial, knew the problem, things got better, and then he escaped and left without notice. Is this relapse? I mean, obviously, I can't say for sure because I don't know your person, but it sounds like it. um, and that can happen, right? Like you have those little moments of clarity, or sometimes like long stints of clarity, and people go backwards. And usually, what happens when someone has really sort of gotten it for a while, it's not usually that they go 100% back into denial, but they convince themselves that they're gonna do it differently this time. Like, they set up some kinda thinking scenario where they make it okay just this one time or just a little bit or just in this circumstance or just this drug and not that drug, and they let themselves put their toe in the water, and then once they put the toe in, they just fall all the way in. But my guess is that something like that happened, and it can happen. People can kinda go back and forth in that denial, and you have to shift with them, right? Like, if you have someone in an active stage of change, you're reacting to them in a certain way. If they shift back, you gotta shift back with them, which is hard. It's hard to go for me, it's hard, like, it's easy when someone's in denial when I first meet them to kinda bring them out, but when they're out and they go back, I think that's hard. Emotionally, not hard like as in strategy, just emotionally, it's like, oh, it's just sad, it's heartbreaking. I can't do this anymore. I'm filing separation papers to get me and my daughters out of this hell. I know that scares him. His past changes have just been manipulative to get us to stay. Can I still work on the other two pillars while moving towards separation divorce? I get this question in a lot of forms, Dale, in different ways. And it's, can I leave and still support their recovery? Is kind of what I think you're asking. And I'm going to say probably not. I think there are certain circumstances where you can remain friends with your spouse or whatever, and you can still have that good influence. But in my experience, when it has addiction, addiction thrives on resentment and self pity. And when you leave, it is going to smash that resentment and self pity button, which is going to jack up all of those three gauges. But that's not me telling you not to do that. Okay. There is a point where you've got to disconnect. And I have done that with family members of my own. So there is a point when you have to walk away, especially if there's a safety concern, if you've got kids involved. I've got videos on the channel called When to Walk Away and what's going to happen when you walk away and all that kind of stuff. So you can take a look at that. I'm just telling you, it's very difficult to be out of the bad guy role and divorce someone. It's kind of, they don't really go together, soul and water. My son is in jail. I'm not sure how long. Is this still effective for the situation? Yes, it's still effective, right? If you're having conversations with your son, you might have the instinct to say, now, when you get out, here's all the rules and here's what's going to happen. And you're going to have to do this. And I'm not saying not to not to have any kind of like requirements, just let them come home and do whatever. Like you might be holding the line on sober living or something like that. That's fine. You do that. I encourage you to do that, but you can make it feel less scary. You can say things like, I can tell your whole mindset's changed. This feels different to me. I can see like you've had a change of heart and point out to them these positive changes that you're seeing if they've had them. And I'm hoping and guessing that they have had them. And you can be like, oh, you can make the idea of what life is going to be like, not just when they get out of jail, but when they get sober, how much freedom they're going to have. Because not only they're going to be free from jail, but they're going to be free from this addiction. So it's a framing reference. It's how do I shift that fear and possibly identity, especially if they have a lot of shame or they start to see themselves differently because they've been in jail. You can definitely work on pushing that gauge in the right direction. As long as they're talking to you, you can still do it. Is the goal to help them seek treatment? No. In my mind, the goal is to help them get sober, whatever it's going to take to do that. And for some people, they end up figuring out or deciding they need to go to treatment. And for some people, they don't. And so what your goal is to try to, in my mind, the goal is to try to motivate them to want to make this change. That's what your goal is. Their job is to figure out how they've got to do it. right? And it's probably gonna take some trial and error. They're probably gonna try to do it without treatment at first, and that may work. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. We'll do that. I just say, "It's okay. We'll do the next thing. That's okay. We'll do the next thing." Like I said, make it less scary. Um, so no, it's not to go. The goal isn't to go to treatment. The goal is to get sober and live your best life and stop being held hostage and stop feeling miserable. Will this strategy work for someone who's been in rehab many times and after a year and a half goes back to using and in denial? I definitely think it will. In fact, if this person's had significant periods of recovery, I think it works better because um, they know that life is better and simpler and less complicated without it. If they've had those big long stints without it, they know the grass is greener on the sober side, right? What it involves probably is they're probably scared of having to go back to rehab to get there. If I were talking to this person who's been to rehab a whole bunch of times, I wouldn't be talking to them about going, I'd be like, dude, you could run rehab. You could teach me some things. I'm sure. Get the blackboard out here and teach me some lessons on addiction. You probably don't need to go. You just need to get this thing stabilized, right? And maybe they might need to go to detox to stabilize. Depends on what their substance they're using. But if they've been to rehab many times, I don't necessarily know that they need to go back. So don't make it feel more scarier necessarily, because it's probably not fear of recovery. It's probably more like fear of what it's going to take to get back. All right, guys, we are running out of time. We are almost at an hour now. Thank you guys for everyone who showed up. We have like 166 people here watching live. The little thing says up there, which is awesome. I hope this has been helpful for you. I know it's sort of a different format. It feels a little awkward for me doing a PowerPoint. I'm not a PowerPointy kind of person, but I wanted to make sure I really explained like what is going on here, because I feel like everything else I teach you rides on this concept right here. And once you understand these are the buttons you're trying not to push and these are the buttons you are trying to push, it makes it a little easier. I think the visualization helps. Let me show y'all one last thing. See here. Add this thing back to this. Just a funny thing. I'm like having to look around. I was trying to figure out how to teach this to you guys. My plan was to use the Angry Birds analogy because that's what was coming to my mind. Like, you guys remember the game Angry Birds and how like you're trying to like hit these little pigs or whatever, and the key is to hit them at the crux of the thing to make the whole thing fall down. And I had all these fun images for you, but I decided it might be slightly too silly for such a series. Y'all let me know what you think. You like the Angry Birds? I like the Angry Birds slides. I think they're kind of fun. But the other images I think are probably more realistic and more powerful. But you guys let me know. I might do this workshop again. I might do it with using this metaphor instead. What do you think? What do you think, Bree? You like the birds or the other ones? You don't like the birds? Okay. It's a little silly because this is a serious topic. So I get that. That's why I went with the other one. I was just going to show you these. All right. That's it, everybody. If you want to sign up for the challenge, let me see if I can put it up for you. Or if you just want to learn more about it, you can go to the link and learn more. Again, it starts on Thursday. If you've already come to the challenge before, we are going to have our family reunion, our bonus day, which is going to be next Tuesday. And if you've ever been to any of the challenges, you get to come back to those for free as long as you want to. So I hope to see some of you guys there and get some updates on how things. All right. Thanks, everybody. You guys have a good evening, and I'll see you again soon.